Hi guys, Miss Chester here. Happy Sunday. I hope you're all having a restful and relaxing weekend. Um, I know the weather hasn't been that awesome, but maybe you got to the beach or spent some time with some family. I don't know, but I hope it was good. This week's update is going to be super quick because you should be all done your inquiry project. If not, hand it in now. Um, and you should be moving on to your independent project. We started our independent project last week. It focused on the Indian Act. And this is your second week to be working on that. So yeah, it's kind of where we're at. We're kind of in the middle of a work period, so not a whole lot of new stuff. But I do want to get on here and remind you where to go if you need to check in, where to find the independent Big Idea Independent Project, and then where to find the weekly discussion question. So if I just, as per usual, go to starts.sd69.bc.ca. It's where you'll find our Scalantis page. Some of you are like, oh, Ms. Chester, why do you keep saying this? But honestly, there's people who still don't know how to get onto Scalantis. So just a little friendly reminder. But yeah, scroll down, BC First People Semester 2. Don't forget, if you need to sign up for a check-in with me, send you to that Google Doc, BC First Peoples 12. If you haven't checked in with me so far, you haven't used this yet, it's really straightforward. The big thing is to remember, guys, that the weekly check-in is for a few weeks here, so you need to make sure you're scrolling down to the correct day. So the first day was April 13th. But we are down to Monday, May 4th. Happy 4th, all of you Star Wars fans. So yeah, you can sign up for a call or a video chat. If you video chat, I send you a Zoom request just right before. But yeah, sign up for a check-in. It's a great way for me to remind you what you need to be working on for the week. If you have any questions, it's a good time for us to chat. But yeah, sign up for a check-in, guys. It's super important. So let's get out of here. The second thing I want to do is to show you where to find the, okay, still can't figure out how to get rid of this side screen, which irritates me. Where to find the first Big Idea Independent project that we're working on. Again, this is kind of our first step after our pre-spring break learning, and we're covering the rest of the big ideas for the course in case we don't get to go back before the end of the semester. So you're going to go into assignments here up at the top as always, and you will scroll down to Big Idea Independent Project number 1, and you'll click on that, and it'll send you kind of to where you're going. Again, for this independent project, we're focusing on the big idea that the impact of contact and colonialism continues to affect the political, social, and economic lives of BC First Peoples. And when you think of contact, the first thing you should think of is the creation of the Indian Act. So when Europeans came to Canada and colonized the Indigenous people who were living here, they put in place a series of laws, rules, and amendments that fall under the Indian Act, and they basically were meant to control status Indians in Canada. I won't go too far into it, and I hope that you've already kind of started to take a look. But it's a cool independent project because you get to learn about the Indian Act through a podcast. I actually teach the Indian Act using this podcast if we were in class, so it's pretty similar to what you would be doing if we were doing this in class, which is where we were heading next. So basically, there's a video here. I introduced the Indian Act. Sorry, it always wants to go into the editing. So I introduced the Indian Act, and then there's a link to the podcast. There's a series of questions, so I break the podcast up into 3 sections, and for each section there's questions. And these guiding questions, you have to include those when you submit your final work. And they're important because they're going to give you the majority of the answers to the final assignment for this big idea project. So step 1, watch the intro video. Step 2, listen to the podcast and fill out the podcast questions. And then after that, you're going to pick one of the 2 following projects. So there's an essay or there is a visual timeline project. Both of those projects can be found below here. So you can see the essay outline everything you need to do for that. And guys, when I say essay, don't freak out. If you see here, I have literally included your thesis statement. So all you have to do is fill in the blanks there. And then all the things you need to do for the essay. There's a graphic organizer, everything you need to have in each paragraph. My cat is having a meltdown. She's freaking out. So yeah, and for this graphic organizer, fill it out point form, guys. It's kind of like that planning process to writing your essay. So yeah, point form is fine. And then the timeline project is there as well, all the steps that you need to go to do the timeline project. Some of you have asked me, no one isn't easier than the other, no one isn't shorter than the other. They're both going to kind of take you the same amount of time. And then to go along with the podcast, there's also PowerPoint slides. So I highly recommend you listen to the podcast because there's lots of good extra tidbits that they talk about. But this PowerPoint kind of just gives you the little bit of extra information. So again, PowerPoint, very, very basic, goes over what's talked about in the podcast. But yeah, I definitely recommend you watching the podcast to get all of the information. So again, watch the video, listen to the podcast, do the podcast questions, and then pick a final project. As always, you can ask me about any of this stuff anytime you need any help. Shoot me an email. If it's too big for an email, email me anyway and just say, hey, Miss Chester, can we set some time for you to call me? Some of you I've talked to on Friday nights, Saturday mornings. There's no time that really doesn't work for me. So just, yeah, shoot me an email, say, hey, Miss Chester, I got some questions for you. So yeah, that's what we're working on right now, the big independent project number 1. I assigned it last week. This is your second week of working on it. And yeah, it should be done by next Monday, but I'm going to gauge when I talk to you all tomorrow, kind of where we're at, and we'll go from there. Remember, my goal isn't to totally overwhelm you. It's to give you manageable tasks that continue on with the big ideas for the course. Again, keeping it short, the last thing I want to remind you guys is of the discussion questions at the top. We're treating the discussion questions as if this was your learning journal. So I'm giving you different articles to read or videos to watch or things to think about. And I would really like you to respond to them. They're not huge. It would probably take you half an hour to go through and engage in whatever text I'm giving you, and then answer some questions and post it to the discussion. But again, it is really important. This is where we talk about what's going on in the world around us when it comes to Indigenous people and First Peoples in Canada, as well as different themes and making connections, right? So making connections to what you're reading in your own life, what you're reading in the world around you, etc. So again, the discussion will always be posted under that discussion page there. Last week we did a bit of a intro to the Indian Act to go along with our independent projects. So what do you know about the Indian Act and what do you maybe want to know more about? And then this week is focusing on the impact of COVID-19 on Indigenous communities and mental health. I thought it was really important, and it's just an article for you to read and answer some questions, but I thought it was really important to have you guys considering the impacts of COVID-19 on Indigenous communities and how this idea of social isolation being really damaging to a community that already suffers at large from mental health and trauma and intergenerational trauma. So thinking about things like the Indian Act and residential schools in the 60s scoop and how these events have created this trauma in these communities. And so again, this trauma carries on and carries on and carries on, and then you throw something like COVID-19 in there and the impacts that it can have on that community and how it might be different than the way COVID-19 is impacting you. So again, there's just an article that I'd like you to read and then a couple of guiding questions to go through. Again, that one shouldn't take you more than half an hour. So yeah, I think that's it for me, guys. Again, I look forward to talking to you all tomorrow. If you haven't signed up for a check-in, please go do that now. But yeah, I hope you're well, staying safe, staying healthy, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.